Start. And you don't want me to sing? Okay. We're okay. Rightio. Thank you and welcome to tonight's meeting. If I could please just begin with the statement of acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting. We pay our respects to their elders and to elders from other communities who may be here today. Item 3 is apologies and requests for leave of absence. We have Councillor Quilty away who had sought leave. Is there any other requests? No other holidays planned. Item 4 is declarations under Acts, regulations, codes and local laws.
Madam Mayor, councillors, persons are reminded meeting procedure local law prohibits the use of audio, video or still image recording devices unless prior approval has been given by the chairperson or by council.
Thank you. Overridden yours. Councillors, item 5 is declarations by councillors of any conflict of interest. I know we have quite a few tonight. Councillor Mildren, you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.8 and item 9.2.
Yes, I have conflict of interest in item 8.9 and 9.3.
And I've got one for 9.2.
So thank you, councillors. Given there's quite a few, if you could make sure you give me a really big wave at those points, that would be terrific. Item 6 is confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. The recommendation is there on the bottom of page 3. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Any comments? Comments, Councillor Watson, other councillors? Motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 7 is the delegates report, which is the National General Assembly for Local Government. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to read out a couple of stats, and I know Councillor Bennett's going to speak to this later, so I'm going to let her go into further detail, but I just want to start with the stat. 10 million child brides a year, 5,000 women killed per annum in honour killings. Women 15 to 44 years more at risk from rape and domestic violence than they are of cancer, car accidents, war and malaria. So I'll let Councillor Bennett speak to that further later, but they're just some alarming numbers moving forward and something that we need to pay attention to when she is speaking to it. The National Local Government Conference was broad. It was broad in its offerings and it was broad in its understandings. And there was a couple of key things that I really took away from it. One of them is you actually learn more out of the room than what you do in the rooms a lot of the time. So just speaking to other councillors and mayors and other directors and CEOs, actually, I learned a lot from them. A couple of ones that caught my eye was the National Sales Manager for BMW, Michael Smith. His talk on autonomous vehicles. By 2022, electric will be price parity to combustion, which is a key. And he spoke of their 2030 plan. So he was saying about by the time 2030 arrives, there will be fully autonomous vehicles driving on our roads. But he did add to that, they're about 5 years ahead of their plan. So it's something that we as local government need to start looking at and planning for strategically, and that's basically what councillors' roles are, is to do a lot of this strategic planning. Because these cars are, the charge stations, I'll use that for example, are now being put underground, so the car just has to park over the top of the charge station and it gets fully charged and drives off. So, and they're also recommending that we look at getting parking stations away from our CBDs because we won't need car parks in our CBDs anymore because the cars will be able to take themselves away and just come back when they're called upon. Another thing I took, if I can get my iPad to work, is there was a lot about community. And I'm laughing to myself because I've read this before. Sorry. But there was a couple of new acronyms that I learnt on this conference, and that is pumpkins. Professional, urban, middle class in nice suburbs. There's nettles. Not enough time to enjoy life. Kippers. Kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. And my favourite, because we all know one or two, Lombards. Lots of money but a real dickhead. So everything was based around community. There was a particular graph that I took interest of, and it was around mapping the social cohesion. What makes a really good community? And there's a checklist that council should check off, and I'm going to read out a few of them. Airport, university, local TV, local radio, daily paper, military, hospital, a national event, private schools, affordable housing, aged care facilities, sports stadium, convention centre, local entrepreneurs, cafe culture, vocational training, tourist attractions, united community, and two more in this checkbox, state, federal and local government working together, and also a marginal seat. Now, I'm not sure how local government works in that realm to work with marginal seats, but anyway, that's what this gentleman's suggesting that you have in a good community locally. The other one was, I stopped eating smashed avocado and now I own a castle. It was another big statement I took away from that. And it was the encouragement of our young to start thinking about their futures, basically. We now have 40,000 workers that are baristas. This is a job that was unheard of 15 years ago. I think you wouldn't have asked anyone and they wouldn't have known what a barista was, but now we have 40,000 of them. We have our industrial strategy coming up later this evening, and part of this is about identifying future jobs and future growth. So a lot of the conference is about looking into the future and seeing what is new business, where are our new jobs coming from, and it's something we work on. I just want to touch quickly on the NDIS, because this is something else I picked up more out of the room than in the room. At the moment, we spend $15 billion servicing 151,970 people with the NDIS. Now, this is meant to grow to, by 2020, $45 billion. What I want to ask, and this is where our role of local government is where's this money coming from? And do either of the governments have a decent plan? Because at the moment, we're seeing gaps open up and services open up. And I was listening to someone yesterday and they were saying that their pay rate is now $7 under an hour to what they were getting. And that's market correction. That could be market correction. But there's just too much money getting eaten up in administration costs. So working forward, us as a local government, we should keep our eye on this. Thank you.
I'll just touch on two things. Firstly, in 1966, local government got about 1% of the tax share. But then after that, it got about halved to 2.55. But in that time, pressures on communities and councils has certainly risen. We've seen so much cost shifting from state and federal government down to local government, and couple that with rate capping. So I think as a council, we should be having the discussion around what is our stance on this, and if we could be using these upcoming state and federal elections to be lobbying for this. At the conference, I heard both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition talking about how important local government was. So much of the work is happening at local government. We are the level of government closest to the people. But in terms of the financials that they're giving us, that's not being reflected. So they say this, but when it actually comes to action, we're not seeing that. So that was certainly a big prompter for me to think we as a council need to have that discussion and come up with a stance on that, especially with the elections coming up. I wanted to highlight one of the key addresses, which is, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce her name right, Virginia Husaga. She's an Australian journo, a media commentator and television presenter. So in the agenda here, you'll see a couple of, now I've just taken these pictures on my phone from a PowerPoint, so they're not great quality, but some really interesting stats here that Councillor Lowe also referred to. So on page 10, we've got women in politics, so which is an area that I'm really interested and passionate about. So we can see in Victoria, as a percentage, we're actually doing quite well in terms of women in elected roles. Then we've also, on the next page, got women in local government. So again, Victoria's doing an okay job. But there is still quite a lot of work to do here. So there was lots of I think she spoke for about an hour, lots of really interesting stats and facts here. And it certainly was a big prompter for a lot of discussion in the break-off sessions and during lunch. And I got to speak to other councils about work they're doing in terms of gender, and I also got to promote what council is doing. So in the agenda, we've got heaps of dot points actually about lots of the work council is doing. So I'll just highlight a few of those. We've developed a workplace gender equity directive. So one of the things this looks at is addressing the issue of gender pay gaps. We've recently launched the Reflect Respect social media campaign, which has been really well received with our community. And a real highlight for me, I've worked on social marketing campaigns before around health issues, and I've never seen the reach I think that this one is getting. And when you see the private sector pick up and run with it, you know you're hitting the market there. Our local dating event company had actually picked up our resources. I don't think I've ever seen a dating event pick up council resources before. So huge respect to the team for coming up with such an innovative social marketing campaign. And the other one is we're continuing to upgrade sporting facilities to make sure they're female friendly. We've got female friendly facilities. So we're doing some really good work here, and it's all done in partnerships with other organisations. We're not doing this in isolation. We're working really closely with sporting clubs, private sector, schools, workplaces, but this needs to constantly be on our agenda. When we are finally living in an Australia that means we're not seeing a woman a week die at the hands of a man, when we're not every few hours seeing a woman hospitalised by a man, when our elected representatives are actually representative of our community, that would mean about 50% of them are women, then we know we can take a rest.
Other councillors? I'm guessing not, given that you didn't attend, but I'd just like a few words. I think, yes, go for it.
Madam Mayor, as what I probably said at the briefing this morning, I think the importance, and I commend both Councillor Lowe and Bennett attending a function or a seminar such as that. But what occurred in the early days after the Kennett government, we as a young council starting the new phase of democracy in Wodonga, we went away to a lot of councils and different areas. And the beauty about what these two young councils have done, they've brought back some new thinking, and to really, question us of what we're doing in our city. And I think it's so important. I think we as a group of 7 should probably get away a little bit more, because what it shows us is proving that we're doing it pretty well, or we need to change it a bit. And I think that's what Councillor Bennett has actually said tonight to us, is that we've got to change a few things in our community and our society. So I think it's seen some people think it's a waste of ratepayers, taxpayers' money, but it actually is a bonding. It is bringing back new information and questioning community and us as a council and where we're leading this great city to. So well done on you both taking time to go and learn a little bit more and challenging us to come back with the information. Thank you.
I just was having a look at this enterprise agreements that provide supports for women in the workforce, and I just thought that there was possibly the missing of older women like myself who've come to an age where you not only have to help out your daughter with their birth of their new first child, you've also got the added responsibility of a parent that's suffering from dementia. It puts a lot of stress on older women, and I think often we're the quiet, silent minority or majority, could be either way, but that is something that probably really does need to be looked at as far as people requiring leave as they get older. I don't support mandatory quotes for women to be on boards or whatever. I think this should be the best person for the job. But having said that, women do have had a disadvantage over the years, and maybe we do need to look at that carefully going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Also attending the conference, there was an awful lot of information available. There was many opportunities for, and which is why it's great to actually have other councillors there, because you actually get to cover all the different seminars. But I think that some of the real highlights have been picked up. And Councillor Hall, just touching on your commentary there, if you actually look at our diversity policies, they are incredibly broad. They're not actually about age. They're just making sure that our frameworks that we represent for our community and our organisation are actually encompassing. And the best work that I've seen and the presentation in and around equity was certainly providing the data and statistics around that, which gives it hard-based evidence, but it was actually about saying, let's create the frameworks so it enables equity. And I think that's a really important piece that I took from that presentation. But often there is commentary in the community when councillors attend, whether it be a conference, whether it be a workshop, whether it be a seminar. Education's invaluable. And, you know, Councillor Watson, what you commented on in terms of the information being brought back to the council table, challenging notions, having a look at best practice, seeing what else is going on around not only our state but our country, is absolutely important. It makes for better decisions, and it will make for better and stronger community. You've picked up and touched about the federal assistance grants, and it is, I think it was the #1 priority that the ELGA group said that they were lobbying federal government for, so moving it back to at least the 1%. The rapidity of change is coming at us faster than anybody ever thought. I actually saw that BMW presentation 2 years ago. Clearly it's changed, but what's also changed is now their peg of where they think those significant changes are going to come in and be required of infrastructure, because it isn't, things like autonomous vehicles is a huge impact that I don't think state or federal government's got their head around, but there's also some of those other changes to business, the way employees and employers are behaving, what are the future businesses, etc. So it was I think it was a really good conference. It is always terrific to see. You see every political party delivering and discussing their policies that will impact local government directly. So thank you to Councillor Lowe and Bennett, because I actually know that you took time out from your workplace, unpaid leave, and actually that's what it takes sometimes. And I, you know, absolutely congratulate you for doing that. You've got to spend time away from family, but it is incredibly important, so thank you. Councillor Lowe, if you've got anything to close.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Watson, too. It's under your mentorship that I took guidance to get away to a few of these seminars and plans to further my capacity. Again, I'm going to touch back on the NDIS, because it was the things that I learnt out of the room again down there, that there is systematic problems in change. It's not just around here. It's as I've said before, NDIS will be a good thing, but at the moment there's holes. And the fact that talking to other councils and CEOs and stuff, and they're identifying the same holes within their communities is a big red flag to me. So it just strengthens my devotion to make sure that we get these holes fixed pretty quickly. If anyone watched the 60 Minutes last night, and if you didn't, I'd probably urge you to go back and have a look at it, because this is what happens in our community every day. There's parents out there with challenges that you and I cannot grasp at all. So I urge you to go and have a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's pretty moving. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.1 is tender for pavers for the High Street landscaping. The recommendation is there on page 18. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Mildren. So I struggled to get that out then. Councillor Watson.
Oh, Madam Mayor, there's not much really to add to what the report has there and the recommendation. and you know that it's getting close to finalising this whole project by getting the pavers ordered. So that's great, and this time next year we're going to have one hell of a good-looking city.
Councillor Watson, nothing to close. Councillors, motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.2 is public liability insurance renewal. Recommendations there on page 21. Can I have someone move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Lowe.
Nothing to add really, Madam Mayor. It's just process. We're part of a tender process that goes under a group insurance scheme, so I think it's the best price available. Thank you.
No? Other councillors? Thank you. I sought a little bit of extra information today from, and welcome to the table too, Spencer, today, and just to double check all of our budget numbers. These are absolutely in line with our budget numbers. I think total spend in and around insurance for council as a whole is about $430,000 per annum. We did see, after seeing a massive reduction in the last couple of years, we did see a 6% uplift this year, but we also have slightly increased our coverage in and around cyber security. So good work, and I think that, you know, buying power and continuing to work with the MAV as the leader sector in this is great work. Councillor Lowe, any close? There we go. You can tell I've been on holidays. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.3 is the councillor briefing policy. Councillors, given that I moved this, I'd actually like to suggest not the recommendation that is there on page 24, but offer an alternate motion. It's a little bit lengthy, but if you would bear with me to read that out, I'd like to put this alternate motion, given that I moved the original item. So, councillors, you do have a copy before you, but I will read it out for the gallery and for prosperity and those at home. So the alternate motion that I would like to put in and around this councillor briefing policy is motion A1, you'd like me to call it 1. 1 is that the resolution of May 14, 2018, that effective from August 2018, councillor briefings be open to the public subject to the CEO presenting a report to the July council meeting recommending an appropriate policy and all guidelines around the public attendance at councillor briefings be rescinded. And part 2 be that. Part 2A, that the CEO and councillors conduct a comprehensive review of how the council conducts its processes and procedures at both council meetings and council or briefings to improve their transparency, efficiency and effectiveness for informing the community. Item 2B, and then there is several points to this, that the review include consideration of a draft policy for councillor briefings, the provision of all information including timeframes to councillors and the public. The next item, models a debate permitted under the meeting procedure local law, and then best practice within the local government sector to make council meetings more transparent with its practices at council meetings and council or briefings, including options for public participation. And finally, of this point, a timeline for either the adoption of a new meeting procedure local law under the Local Government Act, and I'll describe and explain this later, 1989, the Act, or the adoption of governance rule as prescribed by the Local Government Bill 2018, which is currently before State Parliament. And finally, that a report on the review be submitted to a future council meeting, but no later than November 2018. Councillors, can I have someone second that, please? Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, I'd just like to explain myself here and why I'm suggesting a change from the initial. We've had many discussions in and around what it would mean, how we would physically conduct public briefings and etc. Through those discussions, it became pretty evident that how are we going to ensure we have best practice? In addition to that, as in one of those dot points in there, we actually have potentially a major change coming at us through the new local government act that's sitting before state parliament. So wrapped up in all of that, I would like to see the best practice actually put down. So that, for me, means taking a step back and actually looking at everything. And I think that it would then provide the better outcome for our community and also us as councillors to be able to improve transparency, provide more information, and for us to receive information in a timely fashion or a more timely fashion should we need it, and really improve the process rather than put something in, we figure out it doesn't work and we've got to go back and change it. So for me, I'd like to do it right from the start. Hence why I've been very considered and quite detailed in what I'm requesting versus just having a one-liner. So, councillors, that's why I've put the motion as is. And Councillor Mildren, over to you for comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of what we're trying to achieve with all these things, I think this is an eminently responsible approach. I think it ticks off all the things that we need to look at to give us a very comprehensive structure as to the way we move forward in informing and representing our community and in the way that we do business in a whole range of things, not just in our meeting procedures, as this is what will set the frame for everything else that we do. How we conduct ourselves sets the framework for everything we do. So, and this gives us an opportunity to totally review everything that's associated with those things, and I think that's eminently responsible, and I think it's a great move. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, and through you to the CEO, would this, if this motion gets up and we do a comprehensive review of the procedures and laws, when would, if the new local government legislation comes down and ours is a bit out of kilter, when would you envisage doing a review of this if this was successful?
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Look, I would envisage that as soon as the Act is handed down, we have to have a look at the whole Act and what it means for us as a local government anyway. And certainly we can't afford to have our own policies contrary to the state government. But there's room to negotiate some of that, but we'll be looking at it as soon as possible. Now, as far as the new Act being passed, Councillor Watson, that's something we're yet to determine, but we know from speaking to representatives of the Minister and the Premier, they are pretty determined to get it done and dusted, and certainly this side of, the end of this year is certainly what's being referred to.
Thank you, CEO and Madam Mayor. In light of all that, I've been strongly against doing anything at this stage, and I'd like to make my opinion that we should look at it after the new legislation is brought down.
I'm supportive of this new motion. I think the previous one had a bit of a limitation in terms of if we're looking from a transparency and accessibility point of view, just opening up our Monday briefings doesn't necessarily make that more transparent or accessible. It might even make it less because people can struggle getting to a Monday night meeting, let alone a Monday meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I think definitely taking more of a bird's eye view of this is a really responsible thing to do, as Councillor Mildren has said. And it's exciting to be on council at a time where we're making big changes like this to how it's been traditionally done.
I'm supportive of the review. I think it's important that we have discussions about how we will proceed forward with how we will run these briefing sessions. There will be times when we will have commercial in confidence where the briefings will not be open to the public to be able to listen to, and how we put that into the agenda to make it run smoothly that will be discussed as well. So I think it's important that we do sit down and work it out, thoroughly before we move forward with it.
I'd just like to echo all my other councillors, actually. I think it's all been said, and I look forward to the report being presented. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you for the open conversation that we've had, because it's pretty easy to summarise why I put such detail into a motion. and it's better result for our community, more effective and efficient, best practice, reflects new legislation, and as any good practice should do, continual improvement. So, councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? Motion is carried. Councillors, the next item is donation requests. If you just give me a minute while I get to it. So the recommendation is there on page 34. Can I have someone move? Thank you, Councillor Bennett, looking very smiley. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett.
So, Border Trust. So, Council has supported Border Trust since 2012. In the past 2 years, we've sponsored Border Trust with $2,000 for those per annum, and Albury City has also done the same. The surrounding councils that the Border Trust also works with, the smaller councils, they've put in $1,000. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we've got a Border Trust board member in the audience as well. About a month ago, I represented Council at the Border Trust Big Give event, and they gave out about $200,000 into our community, which is absolutely phenomenal. In the past 10 years, they've invested $1.3 million back into our community. So I think council investing $2,000 to support Border Trust to then invest $200,000 is a very good return on investment for us. With the other donation request, Tots for Teens, so going back to the Border Trust, they actually run a back-to-school program. They give out one $50 voucher for Target per family for a student to buy necessary items like a school bag or a school uniform. This program is fantastic, but it only runs in February and March, whereas what Tots for Teens is proposing is that they'll actually run the whole, across the whole year, which is fantastic, and there's certainly a big need in our community for this. I work over at Gateway Health, and I heard a story a few weeks ago about, it was a little foundation kid, so 5 or 6, and he had always got hand-me-downs and had never received anything new, and he had just got this $30 pair of shoes and thought he was the coolest kid in school. So fantastic, tiny investment on council's behalf, and these community groups just make this money go so far.
Again, I echo Councillor Bennett's words there. And probably the only thing I can add to that is I do have some contacts in the shoe industry, so I might even be able to help Tots to Teens get more bang for their buck on their shoes. So I'd offer up that service to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm probably out of step with this because it's not a matter about how deserving the charities are. I don't think there's any question about all that. We've got a lot of very good charities that work in our community and they're all deserving of support. However, donation to charities in this manner is effectively a welfare transfer payment, which is not the role of council. And council rates are not a tax, but are a payment for the delivery of services and community infrastructure. The collection of rates revenue for welfare transfer payments is a misuse of ratepayers' funds and not a council role. Irrespective of how deserving or well-run these charities are, it's up to the individuals in the community to decide which charities they wish to support. It's not council's role to make such decisions about ratepayers' funds. To take it a bit further, how do we say to the next lot of deserving charities that come to us, sorry, we can't give everybody money? When we select these ones who are deserving, and equally so, the next one, and the next one, and the next one will be deserving, how do we say, sorry, we can't do yours, or are we going to just keep rolling out the money? I can't support this motion because I don't think it's an appropriate use of council funds. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, while we have a line item budget in the budget and of $20,000, that we don't have to spend the $20,000, but I remember the early days of the Border Trust where it really struggled, and now we've got something that has the ability to help our community and greater community. So in saying that, I commend the two organisations for the money for this time round, and we've got to follow criteria. We're very diligent with what we do with each donation that comes before us. We don't necessarily have to spend the $20,000, but we have the line item, we've approved it in our budget, therefore we should not just leave it sitting there.
Yes, well, I understand where Councillor Mildren is coming from, but we do have an allocation for 20,000. You know, we will get people applying, or groups applying for these requests going forward through the years, but and we've got to make a decision on each individual one. And I find that these requests, I would support these requests. I would take each one individually, though. Yep.
Thank you. Councillors, I think seeing this as a welfare donation, in my opinion, is absolutely incorrect. What we're doing is we're actually supporting volunteers and community groups who do more than just support welfare. This is actually about growing community capacity. This is actually about supporting the most vulnerable in our community. But it's actually about propping up our volunteers to be able to do this. It's not about paying the volunteers. This is actually just making sure that they can return the phone calls or post out the vouchers or do what they need to do their business. And we talk about that ripple effect and the value. And Councillor Bennett, you made comment that, you know, $200,000, 26 grants were given out by Border Trust in the last 12 months. If you actually look at the total given out by Border Trust, and I'm incredibly familiar with it because I was actually around in its infancy and to start it and to put some money in the bank. And in total, they've given out $1.4 million to our community. And it's the regional community too. It's not just Wodonga. So, you know, also Albury City and the other regional councils in our region and sitting under that banner also contribute. And that's actually about just making sure that the office can run so that people can put their applications in for grants. It's an incredibly important part, in my opinion, in terms of supporting our community. And $20,000 in a $65 million budget isn't a big ask, not when you consider the return to the greater community. So I'm pleased to see the two proposals put forward. And when you do hear those stories, Councillor Bennett, how a young kid now actually wants to go to school because they've got a pair of school shoes, how could anybody argue? So, councillors, I am incredibly supportive of both of those proposals being put forward. Can I go back to Councillor Bennett for any close?
So in terms of Councillor Mildren's comments about a limitation, well, there is a very clear limitation, and that's 20 grand, which we have in our budget. And I think if you went to a majority of ratepayers and said, out of our $65 million budget, we've allocated 20 grand, so that's, I don't even know, 0.0 something% of our overall budget, and that's going towards, I just counted some of the Border Trust projects, and I got to about 30 and I lost track. So if I said your 0.0001% of your rates is going to 30 different really well-deserving projects around Wodonga and Albury and the regions, I think they'd be okay with that.
Now, councillors, I just have reread this recommendation, and I'm going to ask the mover and seconder was Councillor Bennett and Councillor Lowe, yes. That's why I'm looking at you, Councillor Bennett, that the council make a determination. We'll need to change that word slightly to say to donate funds to Team Tots of 2,000, because otherwise it actually just says that they're being put forward. Is that correct? Yep. So the wording needs to really reflect that council will donate funds to, 1, Tots to teens of $2,000 and 2, Border Trust of $2,000. As the seconder, are you happy with that? Because otherwise it's not quite correct and therefore the motion wouldn't be appropriate. Councillors, did anybody else need to talk to that? Are you comfortable with that? We've got a mover and I've got a seconder. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 8.5 is the Birallee Park tennis courts. Now, I've actually just got to go back and whip that out because I've now lost my extra piece of paper. I know, and I've just stuck it into my minutes. Thank you. Item 8.5. Yes, it is page 42. Sorry, I was just looking for this other piece and I'd stuck it into the other item. I do know that there's an possible alternate motion. Councillor Mildren,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take advice at the end as to the terminology I use, but my motion is that the resolution of March 18, 2018 be rescinded, and that council land comprised in the Birallee Park tennis courts be dealt with in accord with the overall Birallee Park strategic plan, or maybe a different terminology. Master plan. Birallee Park master plan. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So, councillors, that's the new motion being put. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Mildren, for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we first moved the motion back in March, it was a motion made with a very narrow margin of, I guess, acceptance, because not that the margin, the vote got through, but the council looked at the matter as to say, well, this is public land, and we're looking at an opportunity, which is perhaps a rare opportunity, to get more comprehensive use of the public land and upgrading of the courts for a relatively small cost to council and cost to the community through council. So in that context, there was a divergence from the strategic planning that had been done in relation to Birallee Park with the overall total master plan. This land was originally identified as not continuing to be used as a tennis court or a set of tennis courts, and the decision that was made was mixed up with a whole range of other things that were going on at the time, and it was opportunistic. We've had the tennis club come back to us and say, well, no, they don't accept what we've said, and that's fair enough. I mean, that's the club's prerogative, and I think that's well and good that they've done that, but it's also now our prerogative to say, well, thank you very much, but no, thank you, and I think we should just revert back to where we were with our strategic planning. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think Councillor Mildren has summed it up adequately, but I'd also like to, through you, CEO, thank the staff for doing quite a lot of work in terms of looking at all available options.
Councillor Mildren, back to you for any close. Nothing. Councillors, motion is there before us, the new motion that you do have a copy of. All those in favour? Against? Oh, okay. So we have given that we actually have 6 councillors here tonight, I'm just going to seek some advice so I manage to make sure that we have this correct. Councillors, I just need to seek a little bit of further advice, given that we're actually rescinding and changing a motion. So I'm just going to adjourn the meeting for a few moments while I step outside with the Governance Officer and the CEO to make sure that what is put and where we end up landing is correct. So just excuse me for one moment, and this is where we need the musical interlude. something new. So, councillors, as the chair, it beholds me to actually make a casting vote. I've had to do this on one other occasion now. Councillors, upon some discussion and some advice, given that we actually have a publicly adopted strategic plan, the current motion sitting tonight refers to that. That has to be the standing overarching document. In my opinion, it is that should we take this on, this is an offshoot to that. It is different from that strategic master plan. It is a plan that had been put out to community, discussed with community, adopted with community. So to override it at this point with a casting vote, I think would be incorrect. Therefore, to make it absolutely clear, I'm supporting with the casting vote the motion that's being put tonight, which means we revert to the standing Birallee Park master plan. So my casting vote is that. Sure. Your point of order is?
My point of order is, and just to seek clarification, that the master plan from when the hockey fields were resurfaced and the netball courts were resurfaced, the actual original master plan was the netball hockey goes to Baranduda, the hockey netballers go up to there. So that was the master plan. Doesn't the master plan become not a master plan when that hasn't happened?
It still currently stands. It hasn't been adjusted, and this particular area still stands. So yes, it is a challenge, but to, I think, override it at this point with a casting vote would be the incorrect thing for me to do. So, councillors, I am going to uphold the motion being put by Councillor Mildren and seconded by Councillor Bennett this evening. There you go. Okay, that'll give you something to write, Bunny. Now, councillors, so the you have that recorded, correct? Everybody's clear, councillors? Yes? Thank you. Item 8.6 is the Domestic Animal Management Plan. The recommendation is there on page 50. Can I have someone move it, please? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Bennett.
So I'd say I'm a bit of a dog person, not so much a cat person, but I've learned a heap about cats during this process. So we actually have a cat curfew. So cats are meant to be locked inside from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m, which is a curfew that I pretty much also subscribe to during the winter months. And also I learned, interestingly enough, that cats have to have cats registered in Wodonga, they have to be desexed. And this is to try and deal with a bit of a feral cat problem that pretty much every council that I know of has. But also, interestingly enough, that Wodonga was the first council in Victoria to bring that in. So awesome to our local laws guys for doing that so early on. During this community consultation, quite a lot of ideas and issues came up. Some of them being around pet education, like the event we used to have called Paws in the Park, investigating and exploring the current dog park and looking at maybe some upgrades and also maybe even an additional dog park. So all of this in this plan will be further explored. That's all quite detailed, and having worked on the current dog park that was here when I was at council, I was in Neighbourhood Power and we co-funded that. That costs so much more money than you would think that it costs. So this plan captures all that and we'll go and do some further work on that. I also wanted to make mention, it says this in the report, that a separate report is coming up to council shortly that looks at a review of the current pound services. So that certainly was something that community brought up, but that's a separate, a different body of work, and that will be coming to us as a separate report shortly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As with all of these sort of plans, they're never perfect, but I think this one's pretty good, and it goes a long way to moving us forward in our management of domestic animals. There's a lot of things with domestic animals that vary between people, particularly with respect to how well people manage and control their animals, and the way that different people look after their animals and the way the animals are treated. Some are, treated like very, very close members of the family, and others are treated like yard dogs that just manage the backyard and don't get spoken to other than fed occasionally. So there's a whole range of that, and what this plan basically seeks to do is to put some level of regulation and control subordinate to the various state legislations that the Domestic Animals Act and others that put the overarching controls in place. This seeks to apply local controls and put in place the different mechanisms of ensuring that we get the right outcomes. It's not perfect, but it's going a long way towards being perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I find this report, plan a good plan. I'm very supportive of animals, always have been, and but as a community we need to have these plans in place. People need to know and be educated as to what is required from responsible ownership, and I look forward to addressing having more dog-free parks in as far as they can go off the leash for smaller dogs as well. So, we will continue. It's there to be added to going forward, and I think it's a good plan.
Madam Mayor, through you, I'd like to thank Craig and Mark and all the staff that have helped and all the community that have contributed to getting this plan and this document up. I think society's changed a lot, and companion animals are so important in our lives. For the elderly, for a bit of companionship, for people who are sick, they have companion animals that go into different places. So animals in our community is so important, and I think we can all be, instead of Craig always being out there being the policeman, I think we can always say to people who may have the dog off the leash or something like that in the non-dog off the leash area, hey, how about putting the dog on the leash, or just be careful, there's another dog coming. So I think we can all be policemen within our community, because the hardest thing about any plan is policing it and the cost of policing it. So I think if we all take a bit of ownership of that, because 99% of the dogs and animals are fantastic. It's just occasionally we just don't understand animal behaviour sometimes, and they do go off track. So, but yeah, a great report, and can we all, I suppose, be conscious of what we have in our community as our pets and our animals and things, which is part of our life. So, yeah. Well done, Craig.
Yeah, probably just echo Councillor Milton's words. Actually, it's unfortunate that we can't have a domestic ownership of an animal management plan, because I think that would solve a lot of the issues that we come up if we had responsible ownership. Thank you.
Nothing for close. Okay, councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. I think another holiday already. Item 8.7, Wodonga Industrial Land Strategy. The recommendation is there on page 54. Don't have any conflicts. Nope, it's the next one, I think. Councillors, the motion is there before us on page 54. Can I have someone move it, please? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Probably I touched on it earlier. One of the things I picked up at the Local Government Association is the where to next. You know, what does business look like moving forward? What's our strengths in Wodonga and regionally around here? You know, is it manufacturing? Is it agriculture? Is it green economy? You know, what does that look like? Where are our new jobs coming? And in the industrial land strategy, that is a component of that. And I noticed Wodonga receiving a state government funding to help with an industrial incubator hub, basically, cluster management, I think they're calling it at the moment, where businesses in industrial areas can learn from each other. You know, all too often we hear in business that my business is different to yours, which is different to yours, which is different to yours. Well, in actual fact, they're not. A lot of the issues that they have can be solved by talking to businesses from totally different industries. Because at the end of the day, we've all got a product or service that we want to sell. So when you strip it all back, that's what business is. as a product or a service. How we do that and how we learn from that and what that is, that's what we can learn from each other. So I think the land strategy is a good means moving forward, but we've got to really work with our economic development department to help with the uptake of this land and really promote what our unique advantage is of Wodonga. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, thanks, Madam Mayor. And I don't think anyone will see this at home, but one of the great things is the vision that I think our city and what we've done over the years, and particularly with Logic, and getting the rail hub there now, I think it's just giving us really strength in some of our industrial areas. And so that's because of our vision and looking to the future and where we are. So I commend this report. When anyone wants to come and invest in our city, we've got a document we can give them and say that these are the areas you can invest in and where we're heading with our development in those industrial areas. So once again, thanks to staff and everyone who's made comment on it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an industrial land strategy, and it deals with the spatial aspects of industry, and it's predominantly intended, not entirely, but predominantly intended as a strategic and statutory planning implementation tool. I think the scope for a higher order industrial strategy, which isn't necessarily land-based, but which looks to the future and what's available and what the advantages and disadvantages might be in terms of attracting industry. But I see that as a different document to this document. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, if I could just add a little bit more to Councillor Moon, I think spot on. Having a document like this also helps us plan that necessary infrastructure, the roads to get things there, to move, to transport whatever's going to be occurring on that industrial site, and future-proofing some of those things. So where you get the abutment of residential starting to buffer with light industrial, etc., we're already well aware of that. We can make sure that we plan that properly. And so having this document absolutely allows us to do those things. Councillor Lowe, to you for any close.
I think Councillor Watson made a really good point about being strategic in this of and using logic as an example, which is mentioned a lot of times through this land strategy. Even whether an airport should be placed there for exporting from, which would increase the capacity locally for our agricultural industry and also be another attractor for Logic. And through you, Madam Mayor, Madam CEO, just the original investment into Logic and what it owes now, and roughly how many jobs are out there?
Councillor Lowe and councillors, yes, the original investment into Logic was around $33 million, where council purchased the land and rezoned it industrial, and then also drove hard the achievement of 4 key pillars to make it that Logic industrial estate that was going to be of national significance. So we had Woolworths as the anchor tenant, we had the service station, trailer interchange site, we had the education component in TAFE, and now the terminal. Currently, Logic, there's about 782 jobs in Logic and about to get a few more. It returns a return of around about 824,000 per annum and increasing. We've got currently on the books at least 2, if not 3, genuine private sector interests that this council is liaising with. So it's not only the economic return, which I think is important to us, it's the social return of an industrial site like Logic, where people do have jobs. They have jobs of both white, blue collar and white collar, i.e. different income levels. But it's securing a future for younger generations in Wodonga. Now, what it owes us, it now owes us around about 6.2, 6.4, but I would need to, through you, Madam Mayor, check that figure. But if you put a business deal like that on the table with a return of what we have, then it's pretty good. Now, Logic also, councillors, has around about 72, just thinking how much developable land, Leon, that's ready and serviced for future industry. But yeah, around about 72, 80 hectares. But there's also considerable land there for future proofing. So things like, Madam Mayor, the inland freight route, which is really critical and going to see communities like Albury Wodonga, but Wodonga in particular, and Wangaratta grow. Everything down to the possibility of high-speed rail. Logic's now seen as a critical point at which both those logistics options run.
Thank you, Madam CEO and Madam Mayor. I couldn't remember the actual number. I didn't want to take a stab, so I thought I'd better get you to clarify. But I think I also read it's now valued at around 44 million. So owing 6.2, 6.4, doesn't matter what the finite details are there, but having an asset in our community worth 44 million that also provides 782 jobs is, if we land another thing like that in our Wodonga industrial land strategy, then all guns are blazing for Wodonga. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.8 is the tender for Richardson Park construction. I think you have a conflict. Would you just read that out for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a indirect conflict as my business has had past involvement with planning and development of the Station 73 site and has worked for the developer in the past.
Thank you, councillors. The recommendation is there on page 66. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, I'm really pleased that this is getting to the build stage. We've been doing land swaps and bringing Richardson Park across the road from Elgin Boulevard across to in front of the old railway station precinct. And I believe this is going to be one of the jewels in the crown for our city. It's going to, when completed, a lovely parkland area. My only concern is that we don't completely finish it off properly, and with that additional part on point 5 of the recommendation is that I'd like to make sure we only have one opportunity to build a city and build some parkland in our city, and let's do it properly and complete it, because just prior to Christmas, when it should be, if all things going well, Leon, we should be opening it. It will look great for Christmas. And it'll be a great asset to our city again for all ages to use and have all sorts of activities going on with that park space. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
This location is such a prime location for Wodonga, especially even when you're entering Wodonga, but also for just Wodonga residents who really use that space. I know for me, so many of people that I went to school with who are now moving back, they always comment on Junction and how Wodonga is just coming ahead in leaps and bounds, and that's one of the key areas people always talk about it. So it's so critical that we keep the momentum going and do this. Look, the car park there is fine, but it'll be so much more beautiful having a really beautiful park there. So in terms of that car park, there's a road just around the corner that's going in that has parking. So for people who are concerned about parking, there is going to be another space where you can park.
Okay, firstly, I look forward to the construction of the new Richardson Park. I have seen the landscape designs and believe once constructed, the park will be a real asset to the community. It will soften and complement the look of the already built and well-utilised Junction Place. So I look forward to this. The item 5, the recommendation states the council officers continue to seek project savings for which could be further used to enhance landscaping outcomes, and that any such changes associated costs limited to 200,000 be delegated to the Chief Executive Officer for approval. I've been assured that money is not coming from council but is funded by Development Victoria. This project will add some great finishing touches to the CBD, and I really look forward to seeing the end results.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hall touched on a couple of good points there, and one that this is not council funding, but it's going to finish off our city. A couple of things I've learned while we've been away on some of our conferences that we've been to is how tree canopies and greenery within the CBD help soften and shade and act as filtration. I think having a great tree canopy can drop the temperature up to 4 degrees in a city. And we also learnt that green space is vital to the health of inner city workers. So it's not just environmental, but it's also a social implication that it has there as well. And it's how you activate the space around the parks themselves and the green space themselves. So it's what you put on the edges is how you get the involvement and bring out the best of what those parks are about. So I'm looking forward to getting the park in there, getting it open by Christmas, and then seeing what naturally happens and forms around it. See where people start to hang out and see where they start eating lunches and that. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask for a clarifier, and either yourself, CEO, or Leon, you may be able to answer it for me. In terms of the plan, so our community might get a look at what's actually going to be delivered, where might they find that information? Sorry, question without notice.
Madam Mayor, I guess once we've buttoned down the design over the next 2 or 3 weeks and made what we currently have is a rather drab engineering plan, we'll certainly get our staff to jazz it up, as it were, and have that on the website. But I suspect that'll probably occur in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Terrific. It'd be great to get it out via some social media messages, even some of those great big signs that we've got down there, just to, I guess, keep our community excited, but also to give them the information of what they can expect. So as we're moving dirt about and there's, you know, potentially noise going on or impacts on how people are moving around that part of the city, that they actually understand that what they're going to get at the end of it, and it's absolutely worth the wait. Councillor Watson, anything for close?
No, it'll just be a lovely green heart for our city that'll be thumping away with good things. But it also represents 2 generations of Richardson families that, which I think is so important. It was the backbone of this city, where with droving cattle down from Queensland, and they ended up at the Wodonga sale yards, which was located not from there. A few of our audience would remember some of those things. But it was a fantastic. The Richardson family has contributed to this community so well over the years, and I'll be glad to see it renamed and dedicated again.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Good comments. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.9, conflict. You're the only one with a conflict on this one? Okay, that's right. Thank you. I'll just wait for Councillor Mildren to come in. Welcome back, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, would you just read that out for us, please?
Yes, I have a conflict of interest for the planning item 8.9, and it's an indirect interest by close association with the proposed developer of this development.
Thank you, councillors. The long recommendation is there on page 76 all the way through to page 81. Can I have someone move that, please? Thanks, Councillor Watson. Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
Oh, Madam Mayor, it's a very long recommendation. I certainly am not going to go through bit by bit, but you know, we think we'd try and get everything right the first time we do our planning and our rezoning and all sorts of things. And But looking at what's presented to me and that neighbourhood character and design and the infrastructure and all those sort of things, the amenity to the impacts on the community, I don't think are altering too much, and therefore I think the recommendation should go through. One of the reasons why it has come up is because it's had more than 7 objections, which means it has to come 5. Thank you, Leon. That's why it's come to tonight's meeting.
So yes, as Councillor Watson said, this has been triggered to come up to us just because there's over 5 objections. This application complies with our planning scheme. There's some objections here about neighbourhood character, but as you can see on page 67 with the plan, there are other smaller lots in the vicinity, so that's not a relevant objection.
Double check process. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Other councillors? Councillor Mildren?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I and every other councillor around this table are responsible for determining this application de novo. We are responsible under state law to consider all relevant matters under the Planning and Environment Act, the Wodonga Planning Scheme and relevant associated documents, such as the Section 173 agreements, covenants and guidelines. We as councillors must be satisfied that the proposal meets or does not meet, as the case may be, the planning requirements. In these circumstances, it's inadequate due diligence to simply accept an officer's determination or recommendation without an unbiased, full and comprehensive report that raises all relevant legal and associated matters on all sides of the issue. Otherwise, the officer delegation of authority should apply and the matter not be referred to council for determination. This is not a matter where councillors can say that they do not have expertise. It is the responsibility of each councillor to understand the process and to obtain all the relevant information to enable a decision to be made de novo. I am concerned that I, as a councillor, have not seen a copy of title to the subject land. I've not seen a copy of the design guidelines that we're being asked to remove from the application of this land. I have no evidence as to what the detailed implications of the design guidelines are in respect to the subject land or adjacent land until the officer assessment, which was not included in the public documents, was sought and provided. Councillors had no detail in respect to Res Code clauses 55 and 56 compliance, other than a simple statement that the proposal complies without any reference to how that recommendation was reached. Remembering here that councillors are charged with the responsibility of determining de novo, this is not a delegated decision process. In this matter, we are being requested to remove the design guidelines as applied by council through a Section 173 agreement because the proposal does not accord with these guidelines. It is very unclear to me how this proposal is affected by the design guidelines. If the proposal is non-compliant with the guidelines, then why is it that the guidelines should be removed from application to this land and remain applicable to all other lots the subject of the 173 agreement? Why a favouritism of the subject land over every other lot? Why have the design guidelines in the first place, and why use the legally binding Section 173 agreement process if at the first sign of non-compliance the guidelines are to be selectively removed? Amongst all of this, there is one overriding unanswered concern. How is it that the report to council consistently suggests that the proposal complies, yet the design guidelines need to be removed? I'm very concerned as to how an integrated planning interpretation and determination can be made in respect to state and local policy and Res Code provisions when at the same time the proposal is non-compliant with the design guidelines, or is that the design guidelines are flawed and inconsistent with other standard planning provisions? If the latter is the case, then that opens Pandora's box. If councillors are to simply tick the box of officer recommended determinations without due diligence and questioning, then why are the officers not responsible for the decision making through delegated authority as the case with most planning determinations? With regard to the removal of the 173 agreement and desired guidelines, simply don't have the adequate information to make a determination. Why impose the burdens and costs associated with the 173 agreement simply to remove the relevant guidelines at the first non-compliance? It's simply not enough to say that a proposal meets Res Code, therefore design guidelines are not relevant. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe, did you have any comment? No? Yep.
Yep. I appreciate Councillor Mildren's industry that he works in, and I appreciate the rest of the councillors around the table about their industries that they work in. I also appreciate that we all have our own different strengths and weaknesses here, and to work as a team collaboratively is better than working in a combative motion with each other. I think we need to draw on each other's skills and be able to entrust a certain amount in each other in regards to those skills of what we've got. Not one councillor can sit here and say they can be all over every skill. I will never ever make a planning person. I spent 20 years in retail and management. So that was my chosen field. Yours was planning, I understand that. So we have to have a certain amount, we have to ask questions, we have to draw off each other, and we also have to rely on the expertise of the staff who are experts, a lot of them. So I'm more than happy to go through and go, well, it's reached some planning controls here. The bush spot, it's been ticked off by the CFA, it's been ticked off by North East Water, and as with anything, you can make an argument for or against anything, but I'll talk directly to this. To me, it satisfies what I learnt in our planning course that we did, and it checks all those boxes, so I'll be voting in favour of the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Having not been here for some of the previous discussions, I would hope and I would assume that Councillor Mildren, that you raised those issues. Given that, again, and I guess Councillor Lowe, I think you've summated it incredibly well, we do have subject expert matters in our staff, and that's what we rely on, and we can make the best decision that we can with the information provided to us. I will be supporting it tonight, given the recommendation that's being put forward by the staff. Councillors, back to Councillor Watson for any close.
Madam Mayor, I just look at on page 67, basically the estate is finalised and there's only this little bit. It has gone through all the planning processes, referral areas of reporting back, and I believe we have to have faith and trust in our staff, and they have done a fantastic job to get to this point, and the motion should be put.
Thank you. Councillor's motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Could you please bring Councillor Hall back in? Welcome back, Councillor Hall. Item 9.1 is the finance report for June. The recommendation to receive and note this report is there on page 95. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett, any comments? Councillor Watson?
Sorry about that, Madam Mayor. I think on page 84, they're still with the repayments and readjustments are still occurring. So really, the next month's report will probably confirm all those changes. I get the nod from you, Spencer, so I think that's correct.
Councillors, we have a couple of major roles as councillors, and number one is actually our budget and then checking our financials as they come through and looking at the actuals. I think we need to continue to congratulate the CEO through you, CEO, and all the way through your staff. Is we see repeatedly where we work incredibly hard to not only achieve budget, but sometimes do better than that. And that means that we then have the great luxury of looking at further provision for our community and further improvements to service. So, you know, the results are clearly we don't have final numbers as we see some of those final adjustments come through, but seeing some of those numbers, and I know we continue to try and improve where we forward look to what our rate growth will be, all of those things. But, you know, we can reflect on some pretty big savings we've managed to achieve even this last year. LED lighting, for example, we saved, you know, a quarter of what we thought it was going to cost us simply by buying smarter, working harder. And I think that our community should be really pleased that we're working as hard as we can to respect our community's money. Back to you, Councillor Bennett, for a close. Councillor's motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.2, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Bennett. Is this the one you have a conflict on? 9.2? Yes. Councillor Mildren, would you please go first, and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a conflict in this because my business acted for an applicant landholder in respect to an application listed in the report.
And I've got an indirect interest by close association. One of the properties listed is that of a close relative of mine.
Thank you. Councillors, the item 9.2, planning report for June, and the recommendation is there on page 98. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Lowe, any comments? Councillor Hall? Councillor Watson? No. Councillors, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Now you're 9.3. Thank you. Item 9.3 is the building report for June. Councillor Hall.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest for the building report, 9.3. I have two properties. It's a direct interest. Two properties in the building report are building permits for two properties I own in partnership with my husband.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Item 9.3, building report. The recommendation is there on page 102. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe? No, Councillor Watson? No, is nobody else excited that there's a sushi shop opening again? I am. Councillor Lowe, anybody want to talk against this? Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. I'm very excited. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Hall. Item 9.4 is the Competitive Services Report for June. The recommendation is there on page 106. Can I have someone move to receive and note that, please? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Any comments? Nope. Anybody need to speak against it? I'll put the motion. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.5 is the Audit Committee meeting for May. The recommendation to be received and noted is there on page 107. Given our delegate is actually off on holidays, can I have someone move those minutes, please? Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Thanks, Councillor Hall. Any comments?
Since our delegate is on holidays, I have no comments.
The opportunity to do a small ad. I do believe that we're going to have some audit positions on this committee, the community ones, skill-based, actually come up. I'm not too sure when they are, but I know it's imminent. So I'm just running a free ad. So if anybody is out there and has particularly around accounting skills, etc., we would love for you to apply. To councillors, if there's anybody who needs to speak against this, no. If not, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.6 is the Rating Strategy Reference Group. The recommendation is there on page 111. Can I please have someone move that? Thanks, Councillor Hall. Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, any comments?
Just a quick comment. Councillor Coulty and myself will be on the reference group panel and, interviewing, and look forward to having some quality people put their hand up and apply for a position on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 10.1, Assemblies of Councillors. That is for information only unless there is any comments that need to be raised, any issues. I will skip through those. Item 10.2, Status Report on Council Meeting is again for information only. That brings me to item 11.1. Councillor Bennett.
Councillors, I've got some alternate wording on this one, alternate motion. So, councillors, this is my first solo notice of motion. I picked an interesting one, I think, to tackle for the first one. So I've gone back and forth with this wording. So I'm just changing some wording in one. You've got that in front of you, but I'll read that out. So it's that one, that council officers prepare a report that provides policy options for the use of council-owned land for the performance and display of exotic animals in circus and carnivals. So 2 is exactly the same, A and B.
Do you have somebody to second that motion, Councillor Bennett? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bennett, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. So let me just start by saying this is just about starting the conversation. This is about asking our experienced and skilled and qualified council officers to bring us a report that looks at all the facts, all the figures, all sides of all stories for us to make an informed decision about. This motion for me is a direct response from a high volume of community members getting in contact with me around exotic animals being in the circus on the causeway. So the number one question that I got from people was, I actually thought this was illegal. How is this going on? So that is what has prompted this motion. And I'm focusing really clearly on council's specific role here, which is on council-owned land. I'm not looking at any other private land, it's just council-owned land in the scope of this report. In researching this motion, I've discovered that about approximately 45 other councils have a similar policy on this. So looking at what happens on council-owned land, and particularly circuses that have exotic animals, is not new age stuff. It's, there's lots of other councils who are doing that. There's actually only 2 circuses in Australia that still use the outdated practice of having exotic animals in their circuses. The majority of circuses don't. For example, like our very own fruit fly circus. I've had one person say to me in the past week, how come you've been specific about excluding petting zoos from this motion? So I thought I'd just explain that one. That's because I've had a really high volume of people get in contact with me saying, why are there lions in cages on the causeway for weeks on end? I have never heard someone say to me, why are there rabbits in the petting zoo at the yearly children's fair for a few hours? So that is why I've just focused on exotic animals here. About 2 weeks ago, a community member, Lauren, who is in the audience with us tonight, started an online petition directed to Wodonga Council, and councillors have received a link to this. It appears that lots of people that have signed this petition are young local people, and that certainly reflects who has been in contact with me about this. So I checked the petition yesterday, I think, and it was at about 1,415 signatures, which is a pretty high amount of signatures in a small time. For me, it's quite frustrating that the current situation means that online petition isn't formally tabled as a petition, just considered as community feedback. So lately I've been involved in quite a lot of forums with the topic of young people, are they engaged in politics? And one of my key points is, yeah, they are engaged in politics and decisions that affect them, just in sort of non-traditional ways. For example, lots of young people are very active online, and particularly with online forums. So I'd be hoping that sometime in the near future that we can look at this and acknowledge and give the recognition to those new ways that people are engaging. But that's obviously a debate for another time. There are countless issues actually that relate to animals at an international level, federal, state and local level, but local level is 100% where I'm focused at on this one. And that's what we're debating tonight, is if we want to receive a report that explores all the options available to us for council-owned land. So this is just about starting the conversation and getting some facts.
Okay, I fully support Kat, on this motion. The treatment of animals it's a massive issue, really, and I think we always try to hide it under the carpet and not deal with some of the many issues going forward in the future. And we need to look for the future. And exotic animals in circuses is an outdated practice, and it's time that we changed it. But I'll read what I have to say on this. The motion being put forward tonight could be seen as more red tape or overkill for regulations, and I'm generally not a supporter of creating more regulations. But sometimes we need regulation for change, because without that it doesn't change. Things don't happen. And I believe this is one of those decisions we need to look at. So the decision to being put forward tonight is not a hard one for me. I've always been a supporter for the better treatment of animals. I don't like seeing them locked in cages or being made to perform for entertainment. But it's not just about my views, it's about what I believe the community want. There's always two sides to any debate on these sorts of issues, and I understand some of the arguments put forward from people who do not support this motion tonight. But I do see that the usage of exotic animals in entertainment is what But I do see that not the usage of exotic animals in entertainment is what most people want. It is my view that most people would prefer to see these beautiful creatures in large, well-constructed and well-designed zoos or free-range parks where they have expert care and room to move. Taking this stance, I believe, is a start, and I see it as a start for taking a more proactive role as a community when it comes to the treatment of all animals and how we can achieve better outcomes for them going forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I probably must be the lightning rod for the opposition because I've been inundated. There's only one other issue since I've been on council that I've been had so much contact over. This particular issue is just interesting. I'm interested to note, and it probably softens what I might have said, that the approach that's being taken is a little different to what the original motion was, and I applaud that approach. But basically, there isn't a lot of difference in today's world between the management of and the training and the welfare of circus animals to many other animals that we do. And I don't accept the comments that are made about the petting zoo, because those animals are treated in a very similar way, and in some of the circuit petting zoos there is no difference at all. The animals ranging from calves to goats to alpacas to rabbits to all sorts of things get taken from place to place to place to place. It's not that dissimilar, and to isolate out circus is, I think, unfair and inappropriate. The circus animals probably are subject to some of the most rigorous animal welfare regulation and controls of any other animals in our country. So we can't argue that it's a welfare thing, so it has to be some other reason, which may be emotional, maybe, I don't know what it is, and I don't think I should speculate. But furthermore, the role and responsibility for making these sort of regulations sits with a higher order of government than we, and to that point, it's not within our bailiwick to be taking these sort of things to our own responsibility. I'm sure there's quite a number of domestic pets, as perhaps was referred to earlier, that domestic pets that are treated more poorly than what some of the animals in the circus are. I think keeping cats in cages under curfew or other things is not that dissimilar to keeping other animals. The domestic the animals that are kept in the zoo are effectively domesticated, because in Australia they are at least 15 generations bred within captivity. So I think what we're doing here is a little bit narrow focused and perhaps based on more on emotion than on facts and reality. And I'm happy to hear that we're now looking at going out and getting staff to gather facts and put some of these things together. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be supporting the motion tonight. And the reason why I'm supporting the motion is to exactly do what it's asking, is actually inform me. So there's plenty of people with opinions, and I'll call them opinions, because a lot of people go by, I heard, I did, this is what I know, I've seen, but they're not actually informed decisions. And look, a lot of this was, I'm going to use the word outlawed loosely, because of vision and stuff that was taken from 15, 20 years ago overseas. And I'm not, I haven't actually formed an opinion either way yet on this particular issue, just because I don't have enough information at hand. So I'm actually respectful of what the report will bring, and then I'll form a decision. Because I like you, Councillor Mildren, you can make debates for both sides of the story, but without actually having all the facts, I'd like to think that I won't shoot from the hips and make sure I get it all in front of me. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I commend Councillor Bennett putting forward something, speaking something she believes in and something that she wants to move on. I just find that the motion, we're not actually banning it, it's just on council-owned land. And I also agree with Councillor Lowe said too, is that the ability to get facts and figures in front of me. So I'm really on the balance of which way I'll vote on this, because so as what Councillor Lowe said, you get one group saying this and another group saying that, and here saying, there saying, well, that's. But I commend our young councillor in having a real dip at. That's something she's passionate about and wants to have a go and put up emotions. And I really commend you, because I don't think that happens enough in local government, that people believe and have direction and wanting to put their voice and put their opinions. And so well done, Councillor Bennett, on that. So I'm still a bit cagey of which, sorry on that pun, on which way I'm going to vote, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Tonight for me isn't about making a decision on what either my beliefs are or what I believe the facts are. It's actually about being provided with the best policy, how we might move forward to best reflect what our community actually wants. So I think the motion is good in that respect, in terms of that's actually what it's asking for. So I'm with you, Councillor Lowe. I don't have enough information to make a very informed judgment. So actually having it presented to me, having a look what other councils are doing and the stances and the rationale and the facts that then sit around that is going to be pretty important to be able to make that decision. So thank you for putting the motion, Councillor Bennett, and on the basis that it pulls forward further information, I'll be supporting you tonight. Councillor Bennett, do you have anything for close?
Sorry, I keep hearing from people, I'm wanting more information, and I've got the motion for you. This is us getting more information. So this is really around community expectations and a standard that our community want to see. So, it's interesting, Councillor Mildren's talking about animal welfare standards, and the research that I've done, places like zoos in Australia have much higher national standards. So again, there's that misinformation. So that's why hopefully this report will give us what we need here. Councillor Mildren did touch on this isn't really council's realm. Like this is 100% council's realm. This is our land. What happens on here is 100% our business. And the bottom line is this is just about councillors getting the information so we can make an informed decision.
Thank you. Councillors, motion is before us, as is the new item that's on that other additional piece of paper. Councillors, all those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, for the respectful debate. Item 12 is petitions, of which there is none. 13, council seal. 14, urgent business. 15, question time. No questions. Item 16 is confidential business. There is none, and there is no urgent confidential business. That just leaves me to close the meeting so that we can do our award this evening. And I'll just remind people that we do this off streaming because of some protection things around, particularly our young people. So I would encourage everybody to stay, because this is the nicest part of the evening. Thank everybody for attending tonight, and to inform you that the next meeting will be on the 20th of August, same time, same place. So that leaves me to close the meeting, and we'll move to presentation of awards.